Do you know what time it is? It's Supernatural Storytime. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. A very quiet place. Okay, so a little background on me. The past few summers, I've been working at a large insurance company to pay for school. The job is relatively easy. Actually, it's too easy because I essentially do nothing for weeks at a time, and it drains the life out of me. But that's not what this story is about. It's about something I found there that just still gives me a weird feeling to think about, especially because I'm in the building right now. You see, my second summer here, I had a large filing project, which was pretty awesome because it actually lasted a couple of months, so I finally had something to do. It was just physically exhausting. My job was basically to rearrange maybe like 12 full files of shelves, which meant standing on your feet all day to reach the top and breaking your back all day to reach the bottom, because I'm a fairly tall guy. The file room is a very quiet place. Well, as in there are only two people inside. The actual room was always being blasted by adult contemporary, post-feminism, overly cheerful hosted radio. Of the two people inside, there was the one lady who worked in the room permanently, arranging the files. She was a nice little old, though doesn't act it woman, with a relaxed attitude and a satisfied outlook on life. She was definitely a morning person because she gets here at around 6 a.m. and leaves at 3 in the afternoon. We're on flex time, 2 hours before I do. She seems to have been there for ages, but with her knowledge of the business, I know she must have worked upstairs, but doesn't anymore. For whatever reason, I guess somebody has to do the filing. Let's call her Joanne. The second person is a younger guy, maybe in his late 30s, who, although a little twitchy and a stickler for policy, seems to be a pretty nice guy. We'll call him Andre. He does not work near the files. He works in the shipping and receiving office, which is a closed-off room near the door within the file room. But he's never there for too long, as he's constantly walking around the building or leaves. I feel like I've gotten off on the wrong foot with Andre after I accidentally broke one of the rules he told me about, letting couriers and other people into the file room without telling him. The room is under a keypass lock next to a heavy metal door, and many people in the office do not have access to it for some reason. It seems very exclusive, I suppose. So the first couple of weeks go by, as I expected to. Long, exhausting work with days that seem like they'd never end. Ever so often, somebody from upstairs will come to pull a file, and I need to stop what I'm doing and move the file cabinets for them. I say move because they were on rails with wheels you can rotate to move them along, and only 2 aisles can be accessed at a time. Each day this happens. Each day I file, and each day Joanne leaves at 3, and Andre comes and goes. One day, I got to the end of an aisle, at the very bottom row, when I noticed a file sticking out from under one of the shelves. Most of the files were very thick, but some only had a few papers in them, so they were thin enough to fit in small gaps, like this one. So I moved the shelf and pulled it out. The file had the numbers writing on the tab with marker, which was strange because they're supposed to have numbered stickers placed on them. But this was not uncommon. What was uncommon was that the file had no name. Because I found it on the shelves, I was worried that the documents inside might have been crushed or torn, so I opened it to have a look. They were surprisingly fine. But there was a little space between the shelf and the floor, so that made sense. The contents of the file were none of the standard forms that were supposed to go with policies, but just handwritten papers and some poor quality photocopies, the kind with lots of grain that you can barely read. But what I made out from one of them was a record of claims, with one incident that stood out to me: accidental death. I know I work for an insurance company, and I know that obviously this will come up, but it seems strange that a claim like this, which would have been huge, was in a file with only maybe like 4 or 5 papers in it. So I went to ask Joanne about it. She told me it was probably part of a bigger file in a different area of the file room that couldn't fit on these shelves. So this was just a placeholder. She then asked me what the number was so she could find it, so I handed her the file. When I did, she just looked at it for a minute, like I'd accidentally handed it to her wrong or something. Then she handed it back without looking it up on the file system and just told me it's in the back office. The back office was just an unused room at the far corner of the file room. The door was always closed and the lights were never on because I couldn't see any light coming out from underneath the door. She pulled out a key from the bottom drawer of her desk and told me to just put it on top of the box and then lock the door again when I left. So I went to put the file away, unlocking the door and stepping inside. The room had no windows. A heavy metal door similar to the entrance of the file room. I turned on the lights, which was actually one dim working fluorescent light with one flickering one and a third that was not working. The room was completely empty, save for 3 boxes stacked in the corner. There was also some strange orange stain on the floor, and the wallpaper was peeling off in places. It looked like they started tearing it off to replace it, but just decided to leave the room as it was. So, whatever. We were running out of space in the file room, so there were boxes everywhere, and I didn't understand why they didn't just put it in this room. I walked up and opened the box. All 3 had CT-08813 confidential marked on them. I've seen lots of confidential files before, and when they're old, it doesn't matter anyway. But the fact this one was alone seemed weird. The files were very old because they were collapsing the folders they were in, discolored, and they used a different material than the normal files. I placed the file at the front and saw that one file folder had some microfilm sticking out of it, and another had a second sheet of what looked like film, but in a paper size, like one of those x-ray sheets. I placed the lid back on the box and accidentally kicked the stack with my foot moving forward, which freaked me out because the other boxes sounded like they had fragile materials in them, and I thought I could have broken something. And naturally, this was also weird because these boxes are just supposed to have papers in them. But whatever, that wasn't my job. I didn't really care, and it was lunchtime, which is a huge deal for me when working, so I just closed the door and left for lunch. After lunch, my boss wanted to talk to me about something, so I went upstairs to speak to her. I had to wait while she was on the phone, so I was looking at these old pictures of the building we were in, which had been around since maybe the 30s or something, and the 3 pictures on the wall were when the building was first built, when it was rebuilt partially in the 70s after some fire, and when it was renovated in the 80s. It hadn't been touched since then, and it looked terrible. But anyway, I finished talking to my boss and went back to filing. This is where it starts getting weird. The file shelves are made out of that typical file cabinet material, so they creak when you move them. But I started to notice while I was in the aisle filing that it seemed like it happened more often. Plus, every so often it would make subtle snapping or bending noises. But I didn't think much of that. It just got a little distracting. It started getting closer to the afternoon, and Joanne said goodnight and left. Now, I'm pretty checked out for the day and exhausted, so I decided to basically slack off on my phone. But I didn't want somebody to come down for files or Andre to see me doing that, so I just went around the corner from view of the door and pulled out my phone. But I also felt that I still have the key in my pocket and forgot to return it. I also realized that I forgot to lock the room. But this is pretty awesome because I can just go chill in there without being seen. So I do. I'm having a blast playing paper toss and browsing the web on my phone in this windowless room, but obviously that gets boring as hell. So I started to get curious about the boxes. My curiosity got the better of me, and I realized no one knew I was in there. Plus, these are very outdated files. So I took a look inside the box on top, the one where I put the folder in. I looked through a folder labeled Casualties, to see what the accidental death was about and how much it paid off. Every file was handwritten or typed with an old typewriter, so it was quite annoying to read and hard to make out, especially since the paper had deteriorated, but I could make out that there was a fire and someone had died on the job because their insurance paid extra since it was on the job. When I looked to see when and where, the date was something like June 6, 1979. But the location bothered me because it was in this building. It's not hard to realize that this fire was the same from the picture of the building I'd seen in my boss's office. And honestly, reading that gave me the chills, especially because it was in this building I was in, especially because I was sitting in this closed-off room with no windows and very little light. I felt an uneasy feeling in my stomach and what seemed like anticipation of a cold wind around my neck. I needed to leave this room. I went to the door, and like any stereotypical horror cliche, it was fucking locked. I tried turning the handle in different ways and pulled as much as I could, but nothing would happen. After one heavy tug, I had to recover by rolling over on the wall and collapsing to the floor, except that I hit one of those flattish light switches on the way, and now the dim room was completely fucking black. While I lay there in my pit of despair with just a slight bit of light coming in under the door, I was waiting to be murdered brutally by some ghoul ghost burned person who is all extra unnecessarily aesthetically scary and screams as they do it for no reason, before being dragged into hell. I felt really cold. Like all the blood had left my body. I could feel my heart beating in my ears, and it felt like every breath I made might be reflected back at me by an invisible wall that was right in front of my face. Not that I could see anyway. So there very well could have been one. I managed to sit up against the wall and reached my hand around, but couldn't find the switch. My spine had become incredibly stiff, so standing up seemed almost impossible. That's when I swear I heard the box shake, exactly like the sound it made when I accidentally kicked it before placing the cover back on. I'm almost certain I heard the fragile contents shift. I still couldn't bend my back to get up, and I didn't want to put out my hands because I was freaking out. I could not see anything around me, and I was sure that if I reached out, my hands would feel charred skin or open wounds. So I pushed myself up against the wall with my legs, keeping my spine straight. I moved my hands along the wall and groped around for the light switch, but heard another noise. This time, I heard shuffling, like dragging on a carpet. If this was the worst case scenario, and this was what I thought it was, I most definitely did not want to see it. At least, I could keep the sight of some horrible burned alive person crawling along the wall to get me out of my mind, so I could turn on the light. I shut my eyes tightly and tried not to make a noise with my breath, which I guess at this point wouldn't have mattered anyway, because the thing knew I was already in the room and where I was. And regardless, monsters always have perfect vision in the dark and know exactly where you're hiding. All I could hear was this shuffling on the carpet, and all I could feel was the texture of the wall, until I finally felt the plastic of the light switch and flicked it on. But oh no, was it safe to open my eyes? I couldn't take it being in this room anymore, waiting for whatever was coming to finish me off. It felt like ice-cold knives were edging all over my body, not penetrating or cutting me, but just the feeling of anticipation was too sublime. In what seemed like my last breath, I used whatever strength I had to push my foot up against the wall next to the door, twisted and yanked with everything in me. The door actually came loose in a sudden bolt. The metal must have warped and gotten stuck in the frame or something, but I ran out of there as fast as I could, left the file room and made a run for the front entrance, exterior, where I could be in the open with daylight and fresh air. The security people walking around on this busy business center street comforted me, because everybody knows that monsters, as all-powerful and unstoppable as they are, have to hide for no apparent reason. The scariest part about this incident, though, well, The box shaking could have just been the noise of something like the vents, and the shuffling could have just been me hearing myself shuffle and not notice it. After all, I couldn't see either of these things. But what really scared me is that I could still feel the thin strands of hair that I fell into when I forced open the door. That felt so real that I can actually remember what it felt like on my head and my neck area and the back of my right arm. I left early from work that day, but the following one I was deathly afraid of going back to the filing room. I mean, it's not like I could have just stopped without being fired. It would make sense to no one if I explained why I didn't want to go back, and I'd be in danger of more than just losing my job. I guess I could have asked them for different tasks that didn't involve filing down there, but I really don't think I was allowed to decide what I wanted to work at my level. Besides, Joanne was still there. I had to make sure she was okay. I didn't mention anything to Joanne when I entered the file room in the morning, and she just seemed the same as always. Her radio was still playing loud as ever, so I guess that's no big deal. As far as I know, that incident really could have been anything, so I just continued working like normal. There was never another incident like that, but I did see some very scary shit in the following weeks of being there. Of what I've seen and heard, I'll list what I think stands out. The more simple things were just files out of place, or random marks on things that were out in the open. These were done in pencil, which we didn't use. Another few spread out times, I've also had the filing cabinets randomly start to close on me. Not fast or actually close fully, but just as if they'd moved maybe one wheel rotation, which was definitely not just them shaking. In the back of the far right shelf is where it ends at the wall. There's a small gap only at the back end of the shelf, though. You'd basically be able to stand in it when the file shelf was pressed up against the wall. I swear one day I was ready to move it away from the wall when I looked through the little slit between the shelf and the wall and saw a face looking back at me where that gap was. It wasn't a normal human proportion either. I saw the face at the very top of the file cabinet, as in 9 feet up. But being me, I just gave the oh fuck this, and went to work on something upstairs for the rest of the day. I forgot to mention, but in that gap, there's also a little door that I assumed led to a fuse box or just wires or something like that. Well, when I finally did move the shelf away from the wall, after making sure there was nothing there, I just started filing as usual. When I got near the gap and started doing that section, from my peripheral vision, I saw that door very gently come ajar. No, there was nobody opening it. No, I didn't see a hand come out and try to beckon me in. No, I didn't get killed. It just opened slightly by itself. And this still could have possibly happened in a non-paranormal manner. So I'm discounting that one. But what's creepy is that since I couldn't see any wire or anything from the light that did shine inside of it, I concluded that it was actually some weird, creepy crawl space, maybe for the vents or something. Either way, I just extended my foot while getting a firm grip on the file cabinet and kicked it shut. The last instance is definitely the scariest one, and despite my uncertainty about the other ones, I know I saw this for sure. That does not mean it was what I think it was. I just know I saw this. I was filing one day after Joanne left when I heard the file room door open, so I stepped out to see if someone wanted to use the files. But I saw nothing. No one was there. And it was getting eerily quieter with all this other shit going down. I walked over to the shipping receiving office, and Andre was also gone, so I just assumed it was him leaving. So, whatever. I went back to work, but I needed a box cutter to open received file boxes, so I went to get one from Joanne's desk. The room is basically a step up from top to bottom like this. Files, hallway from the filing room entrance to the files, 9 feet wall between Joanne's desk and that hallway. But there's an entrance to her area near the door, and there was actually just a separator. It doesn't go to the ceiling. So I got the box cutter and walked back to where I was filing. But oh whoops, Someone's there pulling a file. Oh, sorry, I say, and go and wait over by the boxes stacked against the separator wall. People usually take long with this also, so I don't really care. And I get exhausted, so I like to wait. While I'm waiting, the file room door opened, and it's Andre with some other guy talking. So I got distracted and looked over there. I turned around to the boxes facing the wall, and then went and checked on the lady pulling files. But she's not there. She just randomly disappeared. But I know I saw her because her blue dress stood out among the other colors around her. So I don't know if this is the most ninja secretary in the world, or if it was some disgruntled ghost. But I saw her, whatever she was. And no, I don't know everyone in the building, so I have no idea how to verify it. The last event occurred in my last month working there. After that, I was done working in the file room and was working on something upstairs. On my last day, I went down to say goodbye to Joanne and to thank her for everything. While we were talking casually, I thought it would be a good time to ask her why she played her radio so loud when it was right next to her desk. She told me that it was so she could hear while she was filing because all the paper blocked out sound. But she hesitated to tell me that there was also another reason. She told me that one day she was working down there and she needed to make space, so she opened the windowless room and found the same 3 boxes as I did. She started putting boxes away in that room, and when she went out to get her next box, the door had closed, or pretty much slammed and jolted her. She walked a little closer to investigate how, when she heard the loudest blood-curdling shriek in pain that she ever heard in her life. She said she didn't even know how human voices could go up to that pitch. She said that a couple of other occasions she could hear someone crying in the file shelves, even though they were closed, and she checked the 2 open aisles. Since then, she's been playing her radio loud enough that she doesn't have to hear those sounds again. She didn't know if it was just her or something else, but she just wanted to be safe. Well, I'm back here this summer, upstairs this time, writing this and waiting to go get some work, and hopefully not having to do something down there again. Even though I'm surrounded by people on this floor in my cubicle, I still get chills down my back while thinking about it. Because the truth is, I always wonder who or what is really down there. The haunted dorm room. The suicide room. That's what they call room 733. As if I didn't have enough to worry about on my first day as a freshman. We had assigned to dorm room 734, which it turns out wasn't one of the nice add-on rooms in the South Hall. No, we found ourselves in the older wing of the building on the 7th floor. I wasn't too bummed out, though. At least they'd honored my request to room with my best friend. Lydia and I spent most of the morning moving ourselves in. By the time our resident advisor came by, I was taping up posters and Lydia was reading. "Hi, girls, I'm Beth," chirped the bubbly blonde girl as she bounded into our room. "I'll be your RA this year." "Hi," I nodded at her. "Wow, you girls really work fast," she said, taking in our made beds and hung up clothes. Beth picked up a drawing of Cthulhu that Lydia had done over the summer. She turned it sideways, studying it. "Is this the Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean?" Lydia glared at her over the top of her book. "So anyway," the RA continued, "I know our hall isn't as new as the South Hall, but trust me, there's a lot of history here. This building is almost 60 years old." "Yes, I can see that," I said, looking around. "The rooms are pretty small." "Well, people were smaller in the 50s, Beth shrugged. "Really?" Lydia said flatly. "Yep, really." Beth pursed her lips and just continued to stand there, while the room filled with awkward silence. So I said, "The corner room next to us, 733, is it? It looks a lot bigger than our room. Is anyone assigned to that room? Or could we, maybe?" "Oh, you don't want that room," Beth interrupted. "There were a couple of suicides in there. A hanging and a jumper, if I remember right. They're not assigning anyone to that room. Anyway, I just like to remind you that this is an all-girls floor and guys are not allowed up here after 11. Before we could reply to her, Beth clapped her hands and with a quick, "Well, nice meeting you," she skipped out of the room. Lydia dropped her book on the bed and stared out into the hall. I hate her. Did you hear that bomb she fucking dropped? I'm going to call her dumb shit Beth. Lydia, seriously, suicides? Oh, Becca, relax. Every college campus has a few suicides. Yeah, but in the same room? Lydia sighed. Really? Who cares? It's not our room. Yeah, I guess. I turned to study the little window in our room. Can you imagine climbing out of that tiny window and jumping? You'd be alive for at least 5 seconds before you hit the ground. Oh, fuck, Becca. Can you not? Lydia glanced at the window and visibly shuddered. You know, I fucking hate heights, and just talking about that shit is raising my blood pressure. We could always move into the suicide room, I teased her. That one has a window on each wall. Fuck you. Okay, but seriously, think about it. It would take a lot of commitment to squeeze out of that tiny window. Yeah, well, remember people were apparently smaller back then, Lydia mumbled as she pushed her bed further away from the window. Since Lydia was an outgoing and friendly person, we made friends at lightning speed. There were a lot of parties in those first few weeks, at one of which Lydia inevitably met a guy. I'd known the girl since we were in diapers, so I fully anticipated her having a boyfriend by the end of September. His name was Mike, and he wasn't anything special. Just your standard frat pledge douche canoe. After about a month on campus, the novelty of college started wearing off. Lydia and I found our stride, and we spent more weekends studying than drinking. Midterms were coming up in a couple of weeks, and I was determined to maintain a 4.0 GPA throughout my freshman year. One night in early October, I was woken up by a loud grinding noise. I sat up in bed and strained to hear it again. Lydia was also wide awake and listening. Slam. What the fuck? She mouthed to me. It wasn't unusual for there to be noise in the hallway since other people came in and out at all hours of the night. But this sound had definitely come from next door, the corner room. Grind. Is that? Yeah, Lydia whispered. That's the window next door. At Lydia's insistence, we kept our window closed at all times. However, there was no mistaking the sounds of the window room 733 being opened and closed again at regular intervals. Slam? Who is there? Lydia shrugged. Is someone fucking with us? Is this like initiation? Lydia raised her eyebrow at me. Initiation to what? I don't know. College? Maybe they're hazing the freshmen. Grind. It opened. Who's hazing freshmen? I shrugged. Slammed. It shut. Becca, I love you, but that was fucking stupid. I threw a pillow at her. Well, whoever it is, go tell him to knock it the fuck off. Me? I'm not risking being thrown out a window. Grind. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm an art major. You're a political science major. You go lay down the law. Fuck that. Then call dumb shit Beth. Isn't this the kind of nonsense she should deal with? Slam. I'm not calling her. Don't you put that evil on me. Fine, Lydia whispered loudly. Then we'll just have to ignore it. I have a class at 7:30, I whispered. Grind. Then do something. Oh, I got out of bed and stomped to the door, threw it open dramatically, and went down the hall to pound on the door to room 733, which simply said supply room. People are trying to sleep. Please fucking stop, I said when there was no answer. Slam. Dude, seriously, I sighed. I stepped back from the door and immediately noticed the problem. Room 733 was padlocked shut from the outside. I hurried back to my room. What happened? Lydia asked. I'm not going anywhere near that fucking room again. It's locked from the outside. I don't know how anybody could get in there. So you're saying it's a spooky ghost? She laughed. No, I'm saying there's a creepy shit going on inside a room called the suicide room. Lydia scoffed and rolled over to go back to sleep. You should have been a drama major. We didn't hear the window next door again that night, but the next morning you could clearly see from outside that both windows in the corner room were now wide open. I watched the windows on room 733 for an entire week, but they remained open. Occasionally at night I thought I could hear a noise next door, like marbles dropping and rolling across the floor. Since it never woke Lydia up, I didn't bother to say anything. One afternoon I was alone in the dorm editing notes on my laptop. I had my headphones in, but the music wasn't loud enough to cover the noise of someone knocking on the door. Come in, I said without looking up from the screen. A moment went by and then I heard the knocking again. I jerked my earbuds out and slammed the laptop closed. I turned around. Come! What the fuck? The door to the hallway was wide open. I'd left it open on purpose since Ian, a junior I was dating, was supposed to be stopping by. I heard the knocking again from behind me and literally jumped out of my chair. It had come from the other side of the room, the closet door. It was a closet that shared a wall with room 733. Lydia, you're not fucking funny. Nothing. Lydia, I swear to God, I will punch you in your face. Silence. I walked over to the closet door and grasped the handle. Lydia, you're a fucking... A fucking what? Her voice came from the doorway, behind me. I let go of the doorknob and stumbled back, wide-eyed. Lydia threw her stuff on the bed and turned to me, crossing her arms. I'm a fucking what? I thought you were hiding in the closet, I said lamely. What? Why? Because someone was knocking on the door. Jesus, Becca. Lydia rubbed her forehead and walked over to the closet, throwing open the door. There was nothing there but clothes and boxes. She made a swipe of her arm as if to say, what now? I swear. Becca, there's no one here. I know what I heard. We glared at each other until our little standoff was interrupted by the timely arrival of Ian. He immediately sensed the tension in the room. Hi, ladies. What's new? I gave my roommate a hostile look. There's strange shit going on in that room next door. But that's not new. Which room? 735 or the empty one? The empty one, Lydia emphasized. 733, yeah, I'm not surprised. That's the suicide room. Right, we heard about the deaths. I sat down on my bed. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. 3 suicides, all in one dorm room. 3? Lydia raised her eyebrow. We were told there were 2. Well, there were a couple of people in the 70s and then some guy about 10 years ago. He jumped out the window. Lydia and I both shuddered. Although she was much worse, we were both terrified of heights. A falling death was about the worst thing I could think of. I will admit that 3 suicides in the same dorm room is fucking disturbing, Lydia said in an apologetic tone. Yeah, I heard there's something in that room, Ian said. Like what? No one knows, but every year someone has a new theory. Usually right around Halloween, something gets published in the campus paper. Whatever is in there, though, it ain't friendly. So has anyone ever killed themselves in the neighboring rooms? Like this one? Nah. Just 733. Honestly, I was surprised when I heard they were opening the North Hall this year. They told us we were the biggest incoming freshman class in 20 years, I said absent-mindedly. Yeah, I heard that too. You know, you could request a room change. Ian sat down on the bed next to me and I leaned against his shoulder. Yeah, but they wouldn't keep us together, Lydia cut in. Beck and I have been best friends for 15 years. We can't room with other people. So should we just keep living here next to Satan? I glanced at the closet door again. Lydia shrugged. At least we'll have some stories to tell after graduation. These aren't the kind of stories I want to tell. A few days later, Lydia began to believe my closet story. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering. I looked over at Lydia, who was already staring at me with wide eyes. She slowly brought a finger to her lips. I listened intently, trying to hear what the voice was saying and where it was coming from, but I couldn't understand even one word. I got out of my bed and tiptoed over to Lydia's. The whispering was definitely louder over there, but then she shared a wall with room 733. I listened harder. Never taken mouths of fools. What the hell? Lydia leaned over and put her ear up to the wall. The whisper suddenly stopped and I leaned closer. Suddenly there was a loud bang from the other side. Lydia immediately recoiled and clutched her ear in pain. Someone was in there. Suddenly, more angry than scared, I again threw open our door and stomped over to the supposedly empty supply room. I banged on the door loudly, not caring who else I woke up at this point. "Are you fucking kidding me?" I yelled at the door. "This shit isn't funny anymore. Come out of that fucking room, you asshole." Silence, and then the doorknob started to turn. I don't know what I'd expected to happen, but it wasn't that. I backed up so far from the door that I ran into the opposite wall. When the handle had turned all the way down, something started to push from the other side. The door groaned loudly, but the locks held. I held my breath until the pressure on the door subsided and the handle slowly returned to its normal position. I noticed Lydia picking her head out of our room. She held up her hands as if to say, "What happened?" "Someone thinks they're funny," I answered her out loud. She shook her head and disappeared back into our room. I knelt down on the floor and brought my head down to the carpet, peering under the door crack. It was the first time I had seen into the corner room. Room 733 was definitely a supply closet. There were chairs stacked along one wall and bed frames along the other. A few rotting mattresses were piled under one of the windows, and a thick layer of dust covered everything in the room. The windows were absolutely huge, which was something you couldn't really tell by looking up at the building. They were open as always, and I could definitely see how someone could easily climb through them to the outside ledge. The room didn't look like it had been disturbed in a couple of decades, which sent a shudder racking through my body. The moonlight, which had been providing enough light to see into the room, suddenly vanished, and I saw only pitch black inside. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my night vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, a large yellow eye was looking back at me, only a few inches away from my face on the other side of the door. I screamed and woke up half the dorm. There was no denying that things were escalating. The next morning, Lydia and I put in dorm change requests with resident services and hoped for the best. In the meantime, we agreed to never be alone in our dorm room at night. Either we both spent the night at home, or neither of us did. We started spending most nights with our respective boyfriends. I told Ian everything that had happened, and he suggested I maybe talk to the campus paranormal society. I hesitantly made an appointment, and Lydia and I met with a small, cleanly dressed kid named Craig and 4 of his colleagues the following Tuesday. We told him everything we could remember, every incident, no matter how small. Craig and the 4 other members of the paranormal society sat quietly and took notes for half an hour. It wasn't until we finished that anyone spoke. "Is that all?" Craig asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "Would you mind waiting out in the hall for a few minutes so that I may confer with my colleagues?" "Sure." Lydia smiled indulgently and stood up. "Whatever you need." The door had barely shut behind us when Lydia snorted and rolled her eyes. "Let's go." "Go where?" I asked. "Are you serious?" "Lydia, come on. We need help. I am freaking out. We haven't stayed one night in our room since Thursday, so this isn't something we can just brush off." "Okay." She threw her hands up. "Let's hear what they have to say, and then we can go over to resident services and check on our move requests." We loitered out in the hallway for another 15 minutes before Craig came out and asked us to come back and take a seat. With all the pomp and circumstance of a meeting of Parliament, Craig cleared his throat and made his diagnosis. What you're dealing with, ladies, is a very angry ghost. Is that your professional opinion, Craig? Lydia said. I shot her a look. Yes, he stuttered. A vengeful spirit. A spirit? I asked. I very much doubted that that's what we were dealing with. Yes, answered one of the not Craigs. That goes to the layperson. Jesus Christ, Lydia groaned and rubbed her temples. Mistaking Lydia's frustration with despair, Craig rushed right into his speech. Don't be afraid, ladies. We're going to take care of you. It's true that spirits can be quite a headache if you don't know how to exorcise them, which is why it's good you came to us. Suicides almost always result in angry ghosts. They need revenge. Revenge on whom? I asked. On other students. Perhaps this particular spirit was bullied into taking his own life and now seeks to torment others. Listen. We can take care of this for you right away. All we ask is a small donation to the society. Craig continued. We honestly didn't realize that room was having this much activity. It's really very exciting. Great. Well, thank you for your time, Lydia said as she grabbed my hand and pulled me out of my chair. Do you want to set something up for this weekend? Craig asked. Tell you what, we'll call you. Lydia hurried me out of the room and wearing a weary look, and we didn't speak again until we were almost to the administration building. That was a waste of time, she said. Look, I'm not disagreeing with you, but Becca, tell me you didn't honestly buy into that. So you don't think it's I was having trouble even saying the word. It sounded so ridiculous. Ghost? Well, I don't fucking know. But neither do they. That guy had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. I pulled my hood lower over my eyes as we stepped into line at the resident services desk. Let me put it this way, Lydia continued. They're playing Ghostbusters, and we're living the fucking exorcist. Fine, I sighed. Then what do you want to do? Just keep sleeping at Mike's and Ian's until we get reassigned? I just want this to end, Lydia crossed her arms and stared straight ahead. We all wanted this to end. Even if living next to that fucking room wasn't scary, it was sure as hell distracting. All right, well, we're probably safe during daylight hours, so as long as we don't spend nights there, we should be okay. Our room is only ghost adjacent after all, and our new assignments will come through soon. I checked my watch. Fuck, it's almost 2. Shit, really? I gotta go. Mike got accepted to Sigma Chi, and he's getting initiated today. Oh yeah, I forgot he rushed. The girl at the desk waved us forward. I hadn't even realized we'd reached the front of the line. Let me know what they say, Lydia said as she ran out the door. The girl at the desk eyed me suspiciously as I approached. Hi, you're the girl trying to move out of 734 and Riley, aren't you? She'd caught me off guard. Yeah, one of them. How'd you know? Sorry, I overheard you. I also saw your file across my desk a few days ago, and I gotta ask, why are you looking to transfer rooms exactly? I was tired. I was beaten down. I didn't have the energy to think of a lie. Because shit is going on in the room next door, and it's empty, and it's really freaking us out. Noises, whispers, knocking. The other night I saw someone. You saw someone? Yeah. In room 733? Yeah, I looked under the door. There was definitely someone in there. The girl narrowed her eyes at me for a moment, and then nodded for no particular reason. Well, your rooms aren't ready yet, but I've pushed them through as a priority. Right now, you're stuck, though. There just isn't anywhere else to put you. I sighed. I'd figured as much. I'm Alice, she continued, and look, I've actually done a lot of research on the Riley suicides, and I think I can help you, or at the very least offer some insight. Really? I asked hesitantly. Absolutely. I'm in Taylor Hall, room 310. I'll be back to my dorm by 4 today. Thanks. We just came from the Paranormal Society on campus. Say no more. Alice rolled her eyes. Yeah, so I'll definitely see you at 4. Great, Alice said and smiled. I was early to Taylor, but then so was she. I told her story for the second time that day, and Alice wasn't afraid to interrupt with questions, though her queries didn't betray her thoughts. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. I can't believe it, she shook her head. I had always heard rumors, but I honestly doubted any of it was true. I can assure you everything I've told you is absolutely true. And how is it now, when you're there? We aren't ever there at night, but during the day, we've heard scratching on the wall, really quiet whispering, and sometimes we still hear the window opening and closing, in broad fucking daylight. However, every time I look up from the street, the window to 733 is open. Alice nodded. Well, for the record, I don't think you're in any danger. As much as it sucks, you guys aren't simply a casualty. You just need to stay out of room 733. I snorted. Are you kidding? I would never go in there. I believe that you believe that. But this thing, whatever it is, it's tricky, manipulative, a liar, and it's smarter than you. I'll try not to be offended by that. You shouldn't be. What do you think it is? Something very old and very evil. I regarded her skeptically, and then let my eyes wander around the room. I hadn't really noticed the decor before, but to say Alice had an interest in the occult was an understatement. I can't see any situation where I would be compelled to enter that room. I know, but you have to be prepared that there may come a time when you have to make a decision about entering that room. Because what you're dealing with, it's already killed 5 people. 5? I thought it was 3. Yeah, well, not everyone is inclined to do the level of research that I do. Let's see, there was Ellen Burnham in 1961. She jumped out the window. She was the very first. And then Tad Collinsworth in 1968. He jumped too. Marissa Grigg in 1975. She hung herself. Aaron Murphy in 1979. She jumped. And then Eric Dawson in 1992. He hung himself. 5 suicides? How could the university still let people live in there? They don't, apparently. That's why it's a supply room. And back then? Well, every few years, once everyone who would remember had graduated, the room would be reassigned. This was before the internet, and the incoming freshmen were clueless. But after that last one, Eric Dawson, they closed the entire north hall of the 7th floor and built more rooms into the south hall. So, what does it want? Alice shrugged. Chaos, death, souls, who knows? No one even knows what it is. Okay, so what do we do now? We know that it's somehow bound to that room, though it seems to have minimal influence just outside of it. We know that everyone who ever died was alone at the time. And we know that it's a trickster. That's what we know. It wasn't enough. Why do you think they do it? I asked quietly. The victims? I nodded. All I know is what's rumored to be in the evidence of files. All the suicides were found with pictures or writings that were considered unspeakable at the time. They contain horrible, evil things that would make you physically sick to read or see, they say. And these people, they drew them? They wrote that stuff? Yep. Whatever is in that room drove them mad. That's fucking terrifying. Have you guys considered getting somebody to bless the room? Jesus. Well, you'll have a hard time getting him, but perhaps some other sort of holy person? No, I mean, Jesus. You're talking about an exorcism? Alice shrugged. Maybe. The rumor in the 70s was that this all started with a Ouija board game gone wrong in 1961. Really? That shit's made by Hasbro. Not in the 60s it wasn't. Anyway, it's just a rumor. The only person on campus who would know is Tom Moen, an admin. I've tried to talk to him before, but he refuses to see me. Did he go here in 1961? Yes, and he was staying in Riley. We need to talk to him. I need to know what the fuck is happening, or I won't be able to live the rest of my life as a well-adjusted person. I suppose we can try to chase him down on campus. Can we talk to him tomorrow? We can try. Mr. Moen wouldn't see us that day or the next. We tried to catch him on his lunch hour and then again while he was leaving work, but he got around us every time. It was soon clear that the old man was actively avoiding us. Lydia and I had seen little of each other since we'd continued to sleep in other dorms. I went back to our room twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Usually the other room was silent, but that didn't make me feel better. I could always sense something on the other side of the wall, somehow watching me. It felt like the calm before the storm. The Thursday before Halloween, I came back to the dorm to shower in the evening, much later than usual. I'd seen Lydia that afternoon, and she'd informed me that she had enough clothes stored at Mike's to last until graduation, so I knew I'd be there alone. I showered down the hall in the safety of the bathrooms and then walked back to my room to change. I was supposed to meet Ian in half an hour to head out to a party, and I wanted to get out of here as quick as possible. Since the silence was unnerving me, I threw my iPod on the docking station and turned up AC/DC. I got dressed and then stood in front of the mirror to dry my hair. I flipped my head over and blow-dried upside down to try and give my hair some volume. When I flipped my head back up and shut off the blow-dryer, I immediately noticed a silence in the room. But that wasn't all I noticed. I wasn't in my dorm anymore. Behind me was reflected the dusty bed frames and large open windows of room 733. I spun around in a panic to find that I was actually standing in my own room. I looked back at the mirror to see that 733 was still reflected there. A slight movement behind me was all it took to make me run. I grabbed my purse and phone and I fled from my room, slamming the door behind me. On the elevator ride down, I called Alice. I can't do it anymore, I said when she picked up. I can't go back in that room again. I can't ever go back. What happened? I told her. Jesus, what do you want to do? She asked. I need to talk to someone who knows what the fuck is going on. Is Tom Moen the only person we know who was here in 1961? The only one I know of. Maybe we can get him on his way in tomorrow morning. We'll just corner him and refuse to move until he tells us something. He comes in at 6:30 according to the schedule I have. Do you want to meet outside at the Starbucks in the atrium? Fuck yeah, I do. I have a class at 7:30, but I'll blow it off. Okay, see you then. I wasn't usually much for parties, but I was glad I was going to one that night. As soon as we got there, I asked Ian to get me a drink. Since I wasn't usually much of a drinker, he gave me a raised eyebrow. I gave him a brief synopsis of what had happened earlier, hoping he wouldn't think I was crazy. Ian made me a scotch and coke. It was the first of many. Around midnight, I went to have a cigarette and checked my phone. I had a voicemail from Lydia left at 11:04 p.m. Hey Becca, listen, I just had a huge fucking fight with Mike. I guess his frat decided that for Halloween this year, all the new brothers have to spend the night in the suicide room. In our dorm. I can't fucking take it. He knows what's been going on with us, and he still agreed to do this. He's now trying to convince me that Sigma Chi is behind all the stuff going on in room 733 because they've been trying to drum up buzz for their Halloween deal. I can't. I hit end and threw my phone in my bag. No wonder Lydia was pissed. This was not good at all. I found Ian inside and asked him to take me home. I was suddenly very stressed, very tired, and very drunk. When the alarm went off at 6 a.m., it took everything I had to pull myself out of bed. I got dressed in the clothes I'd worn the night before and shuffled my way across campus to the atrium. Alice was already there with a black coffee in hand. "I figured you'd need this," she laughed. "How'd you know?" "Your texts." "I texted you last night?" "Yeah, at about 1. You told me about Sigma Chi." "Oh, God, yeah." I pushed my sunglasses higher up my nose and pulled my hood lower over my eyes. "Those guys are idiots. Remember how I told you that it's crafty? Well, what if the point of messing with you was to make 733 provocative? You know, to seduce people into going inside? No one has been in that room for years. Can you imagine how hungry that thing is?" "Do you think they're really at risk?" I asked as I sat down on the steps to the admin building. "Yeah. In fact, the only thing they have going for them is that all those suicide victims were alone at the time of their deaths. So it'll be less powerful with all of them there?" "Theoretically, we would know a lot more if we knew what it was, and we can't know what it is without knowing how it got here. And that is why we need Moen." "What time is he supposed to get here?" "Actually, 20 minutes ago," Alice said grimly. It was another half an hour before we resigned ourselves to the fact that Mr. Moen had snuck around us as usual. We went to the front office, hoping to beg him again for an appointment with him anyway. The woman at the admin desk regarded us coldly. "Tom isn't coming in today, or any other day for that matter. He quit yesterday. Looks like you won't be harassing him anymore." "We weren't harassing him," I said. "We just desperately needed to talk to him." "We still do," added Alice. "Well, you won't get any of his personal information from me," she said snidely and walked away. "What the fuck did we do now?" I asked Alice. "Without Tom Moen, there's nothing left to do." "Alice, fuck, I can't go back into that room." "Well then, I guess it's good your transfers came through." "They did?" "Yep. I got the notice when I checked my work email this morning. You're going to Morton and Lydia is going to Tinsley." "Oh, thank God." "I thought you'd be happy about that. I also convinced my boss not to assign anyone else to room 734. Thank fuck. The only thing is you won't be able to move until Monday. I can last through the weekend, especially now that the end is in sight. I have to tell Lydia." I opened my phone to pull up Lydia's number, but my attention was caught by the red 1 badge over the voicemail logo. I hit play. It was the rest of the message from last night. "Even look at his dumb fucking face anymore, so I'm going to head home. Don't worry about me. I'll be okay. I'm drunk enough to sleep through any bullshit from next door. I'm just so fucking pissed off right now. I would honestly rather deal with dumb shit Beth than Michael. My parents must be siblings because I'm that fucking retarded Benson. Let's hang out tomorrow. Love ya." The message ended. God damn it. Alice gave me a questioning look. "Lydia spent the night in our dorm." Alice cringed. "She's safe though, right? As long as she doesn't go into 733. She won't, I thought, although always large open windows of the corner room. If nothing else, the mere thought of those would keep Lydia the hell out of that room. Good. Well, since we have nothing else to do you want to go look for theology books in the library? It's pretty much the only thing open right now." "Sure," I shrugged. I didn't have another class until 10. The little old lady who sat behind the library's checkout desk must have been 1,000 years old. Miss Stapley's eyes were small and watery, and her skin looked like it was melting off of her skull. Still, she was nice and knowledgeable, and she sent us in the right direction for books on demonology, though she gave us a curious look as she did. There wasn't much. We read everything we could, but it either wasn't relevant or wasn't in English. We returned to our desk 30 minutes later. Do you have anything on the occult?" "The occult? Her voice trailed off. Yes, I do. Over there, to the left of the reference section. Oh, thanks. Sorry, I'm too hungover to use the Dewey Decimal System, I said. I don't think she likes the look of us, Alice whispered as we walked away. Our look or our subject matter? Probably neither. Within the hour, we were back up at her desk, having struck out again. You could tell she was getting annoyed as her eyes narrowed suspiciously at us as we approached. Sorry, do you know where we could find something on seances or Ouija boards or... Now listen, girls. Miss Stapley stood up from her desk and looked over her glasses at us. I really hope this is for class. It is, I said. It's not, Alice answered simultaneously. It's personal research. Research? What kind of research? Look, we're not going to mess with a Ouija board or anything, I said. Good. Miss Stapley smoothed her pleated pants and sat back down. Because I can't have that sort of thing going on here again. Again? Alice latched on. The older woman suddenly looked very uncomfortable and started fidgeting with a stack of books on her desk. We may have something on seances in... Miss Stapley, we're researching what happened in Riley in 1961, Alice interrupted, and also what's been happening there ever since. Well, it's no secret, is it? A student committed suicide in that room. Dreadful, but not unheard of on a university campus. 5 students, I corrected her. But you know that, right? Alice was suddenly talking very fast. Because you sound like you're well versed in this story. Please tell us how this started, and we might be able to end it. End it? Miss Stapley's voice became quieter but more concentrated. Don't be so arrogant, young lady. You can't end it. People have always died in that room, and they always will. There is no end to it, so you'd best stay far away from it. But maybe if we knew how this all started. It started just as you think it did. But everyone that was involved is either very old or very dead by now. Just stay away from that room. Concentrate on your studies. I leaned over her desk. Well, I'd love to, but they assigned my friend and me to the room next door. Maybe you can forget about all the suicides, but we can't. It won't fucking let us. Young lady, I never forget. Miss Stapley's voice was even quieter now. My friend Ellen was the very first to be killed in that room. She was my very best friend, and not a night goes by that I don't imagine her wiggling out of that tiny window, standing upon the cold ledge in her bare feet and jumping off the 7th floor of that building. Alice sighed. I'm really sorry, I didn't know. Yes, well, these are old wounds, my dear. Now, girls, I suggest you request a room reassignment immediately. No one should be living on the 7th floor of that building. And that's all I'm going to tell you about it. Alice sighed, but resigned herself to a nod. We wouldn't learn anything more here. Still, it was quite a breakthrough. At least we had some information now. Alice walked away, and I made to follow her, but my feet wouldn't move. Something was bothering me. A small yet poignant word had been buried in Miss Stapley's story. A word that suddenly seemed very important. Miss Stapley, I asked the tired old woman at the desk. Why did you refer to the window in 733 tiny? Because I've seen those windows and they're huge, like 5 feet tall. Dear, you're thinking of the corner room. That's the supply closet. Room 733 is next door to that. No, I stuttered. That's room 734. Well, yes, it's that now. When they built the additional rooms onto the South Hall, they moved all the room numbers down. Oh my God. I suddenly felt very hot and very dizzy. That sneaky fucker, Alice whispered next to me, her skin paling. Lydia. We took off across the campus at a dead run, witnessed only by the few bleary-eyed students on their way to morning classes. When Riley finally came into view, I stumbled on the pavement as my blood turned to ice. From our vantage point, we could clearly see the windows of the corner room were closed. The first and only time I had ever seen it that way, and the window to my room was open. We ran into the lobby, pushing past several latte-sipping, Ugg-booted wearing freshmen who had just gotten off the elevator. I hit 7 and watched the doors close more slowly than they ever had before. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Alice, how the fuck did this happen? I don't know. I don't fucking know. She's been in there all night, Alice, in our room, alone. Alice shook her head, but had nothing to say. When the doors finally opened, on floor 7, we saw a quiet, deserted hallway. I ran toward my room with Alice right behind me. Rounding the corner, I threw open my door, hoping it wasn't locked, and it wasn't. Lydia looked back at me, and for one breathless moment, a cruel glimmer of hope crossed over her tear-streaked face. But it was too late. The next second, she leaned forward so slightly, and she was gone. She screamed the entire way down. Alice ran to the ledge where Lydia had just been while I stood motionless. She stuck her head out the window and looked down just as a different kind of screaming started from the bottom floor. Alice closed her hand over her mouth and pulled her head back into the room as tears of shock ran down her ghost-white face. The screaming from outside got louder as more people saw what remained of my best friend on the cold pavement. I leaned back against the dresser and slumped to the floor. A falling death. Lydia never wanted a falling death. I absent-mindedly picked up one of the pictures that were strewn all over the floor. It was a picture of Lydia's mother. She was dead. I picked up another picture. It was Lydia's baby sister. She was dead, too. There were dozens of pictures just like it all over the floor. Lydia had been busy last night. As for the things depicted in them, I cannot tell you. Lydia was a talented artist, and I only saw a few before I got sick on the floor next to me. Alice was standing in the doorway, yelling something down the hall. I don't know what she was saying because all I could hear was a high-pitched whine in the room. Suddenly a piece of paper slid out from under the crack in the closet door and glided across the floor towards me. I picked it up and studied it for a moment. This was drawn by Lydia too, but it wasn't like the others. It was a picture of the closet from my exact vantage point. In the drawing, the door was cracked, and there was something looking back from the darkness. I put the paper down and studied the closet. The door was cracked open, just like the picture. I squinted my eyes and tried to see inside. Just as I started to distinguish the defined lines of a long face looking back at me, Alice pulled me to my feet. "We need to get out of here," I thought I heard her say. I never went back into that room. My parents moved my things, and I spent the rest of the semester in an apartment off campus. I transferred to an out-of-state school for my spring semester and finished my degree there. Every night I dream of Lydia, pulling herself through the tiny window, shimmying out onto the cold ledge, standing up and knowing there's nothing between her body and the terrifying abyss in front of her. I watch her look down 7 stories to the black pavement below and realize, though not accept, her terrible fate. I see the blind horror cross her familiar features. I hear her wildly pounding heart, desperately trying to race through every beat of the life she should have lived, and knowing it has only mere seconds. I watch her look back at me, and I watch her fall. It's been 9 years since that night, and every fall semester for 9 years I've called resident services to see which dorms are open for new students' assignments. Riley is always open. The 7th floor is closed. This year life and work got in the way and I called much later than usual. I was put on hold immediately. "Resident services," a man finally answered. "Were you the one asking about open rooms in Riley?" "Yes, that's me." "We're entirely filled up and there's a waiting list for Riley. But, as it happens, you actually have great timing. I make no promises, but we may be able to get you in. We just got approval this morning." "Approval for what?" I said slowly. We're opening up the 7th floor.